and welcome to episode 40 of Little Big Knits. My name is Selma. I'm your host. I'm also known as Selma Knits on social media, on Ravelry and on Instagram. And I'm coming to you from here in Ottawa, Canada, where I live with my family and our cat Yoda. So hello and welcome to this mostly knitting podcast. Hello to new subscribers who've subscribed in the last month or so since the last time I podcasted. Hello and welcome. And to those of you who have returned, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am joining you today from a beautiful and sunny Ottawa. The weather is definitely cooling down. Got to give my weather report at the beginning of the podcast. We are nearing the we are in the second half of September actually, and the weather is definitely cooling down, although it looks like the temperatures are going to rise a little bit this week. Yesterday I went down to Westboro Beach, which is a beachy area that we have not far from here. It's about a 15-minute walk along the river, and there was a person swimming. I swam last weekend, and my friend and I were sitting on the grass just looking and thinking, the weather's going to warm up in the next few days. Maybe we should try that. So we'll see if I manage to, but I definitely managed to swim last weekend. I thought that would be my last swim of the season. It was cold, but I might try it one more time. We'll see. Anyway, before I ramble on too much, let's get going with the knitty stuff. First, though, a few little administrative things. So I lied. We won't just get going with the knitty stuff. I just wanted to comment on the sound quality last time. Hopefully this time it's better. I'm not quite sure what happened, but I got a comment from somebody that there was a buzz in the background in the video last time. And I'm not exactly sure what happened because I certainly didn't notice it while I was editing. So I don't know if there was something in the uploading into YouTube that caused it to have a slight buzz. Nobody else commented on it, so hopefully it wasn't disturbing for others, but I just wanted to apologize for that, and hopefully that won't happen this time, but I won't really know until this is already up on the interwebs, so to speak. So, and also the other thing I wanted to tell you that I mentioned last time, I had finished my breezeway sweater. You'll recall it was a purple sort of scoop neck, short-sleeved t-shirt with a bit of a scoop along the back as well, and I really didn't think that I liked it very much. Thank you to everybody for your comments. I'd have to say that it was about a 98% frog pond and 2% no, it looks good. So I think it was pretty close to unanimous that this was not the sweater for me. Somehow there was something in the fit, and I thank you. I mean, after about 20 comments, I was like, well, it's pretty clear this is going into the frog pond. So hopefully I'll be able to do that sometime in the near future and turn it into something else, very possibly the Elton. I still have to calculate if I have enough mohair for it. I think I do, but I'll know a little bit more once I really sit down to look at that. In the meantime, there are so many things to knit, and you know, we'll see when I get to it. Anyway, that's what happened with the breezeway. And also just a reminder that we've got the two knit-alongs. We've got a Garment Galore Cal, which is our year-long knit-along, goes until December 31st. And we've got so many beautiful projects in there. It is all about garments. So whether it's sweaters or cardigans or skirts, pants, jackets, vests, anything that you would wear as a garment. So not accessories. And you're welcome to join even at this time, even though there are people who've knit multiple sweaters over the year, people who've knit one, people who are trying to finish one. No worries. If you are wanting to join in, go ahead. WIPs are welcome. So if you've had a sweater that you started 2 years ago languishing, feel free to finish it during this cal and submit it for a prize. There is a finished object thread as well as a conversation thread, a chatter thread. And we have another knit along as well called It's About Time. It's the It's About Time knit along where you can you are knitting on either with yarn or with patterns that you've had in your stash for over a year. So let's say you bought a pattern in 2018 and never got to it, and you're finally getting to it. Well, it's about time, and it fits in the cal. So you're welcome to join in on that one as well. And I believe that one went till December 31st too. I have to check. I think it did. And I think that's it. We can actually get into the knitting content now. So I've had a chance in this last month or so, because it's been, I think, almost a month and a half, to definitely finish some projects. So you'll be noticing that I'm wearing something quite bright pink. This is the MISSONI Accomplished by Melissa of ESPACE TRICOT. And this is normally a woolly sweater that has a chevron pattern on it, but Melissa had made a linen version, which I fell in love with immediately and thought that is what I'm going to do with this unknown pink linen that I had gotten in Uruguay last winter, so almost 2 years ago now. So I had this quite far along, I think, last time I podcasted, and I finished it somewhere along the way. I'm wearing a t-shirt underneath that has a bit of a print on it. It's got some black flowers on it, so sorry if that's a little bit distracting, but the sweater turned out really well. I have worn it a couple of times. I finished it just as the weather was starting to change, so I haven't had as much of an opportunity to wear it, but it is a great layering piece, a wonderful light. As you can see, linen just has this drape to it. Not great for really shaped garments, but wonderful for anything that requires a drapey flow, which is perfect for this sweater. Before I show it off to you, and I don't want to forget, I had talked to you about shifting stitches around a bit, because the first time I separated for the sleeves and knit down a bit, I found there were far too many stitches at the back. I think I may have mentioned this to you last time, but just in case, I shifted the stitches so that when I separated for the sleeves, I separated for the sleeves about 10 stitches further back, so to speak, so that I ended up with 10 more, I think it was about 10 more stitches in the front, so that there would be 10 less stitches in the back. And that was to account for the fact that there just seemed to be more fabric in the back. And I think that this is something that can happen with people who have larger chests, for example, whether you're a male or a female, really. If you tend to have a lot here and a smaller back, shifting in a yoked sweater like this, shifting some of the stitches for the front and having less stitches in the back will mean that there'll be less fabric, because there was way too much fabric when I first started going down the body, because this is a top-down yoke construction. Hopefully what I just said makes sense. So, and it's meant to be a cropped sweater, which it is, and it's just very, very flowy, and there's just a nice amount of fabric along the back. I think that moving the 10 stitches to the front was just a really, really good thing to do. It became balanced, whereas it just felt like there was too much. Not that there's anything wrong with the way the pattern is written, it's fantastic. I just think that that is a technique. Actually, Ellie of Skeen Deer had mentioned that at one point, and I remember thinking that is a smart idea, and it is an idea that I'm going to keep in mind. I'm not sure that I'll always do it automatically, but something to bear in mind when I am knitting a yoked construction, where maybe I need to do that sometime. So I think I did make the body a little longer. I never really follow the length instructions of a sweater, just because I think I want to make it as long as I need it to be. So I think that Melissa's version's shorter and mine has become a little longer. I think it's somewhere around 9 or 10 inches. I can't 100% say. I just stopped it where I thought it would be okay. I thought it might actually be too long, and after I blocked it, I thought I'll wear it a couple of times, and if I find it too long, then I'll just rip it out and shorten it by an inch. But I think I've been enjoying the length. It's good, and I could see myself making another type of sweater like this. The MISSONI Accomplished was really a nice pattern, really easy to follow, well written, and And free as well, by the way, because Espace Tricot's patterns are always free, and they just design such wonderful, simple constructions that are just very elegant and effective, I find. So I could see myself making this. Melissa had made this in a sort of a, how would you call it? It was not a pure chocolate brown. It was kind of a mustardy brown a little bit, and it was beautiful, beautiful color. And so I thought, you know, this could be a nice thing to have in different colors as well. So it was awesome, and that's what I got to say about this. So, you know, and this was meant to, as I said before, meant to be a winter sweater. So if you really enjoy the construction but would like this more as a winter sweater, you can do that. I think it was meant to be knit in a sport weight wool of some sort. I think it might have been Biche Bûche, but I'm not 100% sure. You'll have to check their pattern online. So it's the MISSONI Accomplished by Espace Tricot. The next finished object that I have not been able to wear yet because I've been waiting to podcast. I feel like when I finish a pair of socks, I put them on blockers and then they stay there until I've podcasted. And then once I podcast, then I have the permission to wear them. So I was knitting these absolutely stunning socks the last time I podcasted. I think I had gotten partway up one, or had I finished the other? I don't even remember anymore. These are the Speckled Space socks by Amanda Stevens. And I believe it's also a free pattern, if I remember correctly. Don't completely quote me on that. It is specifically made for speckled socks. That's why it has that speckled in the title, and it really works beautifully. This yarn, which knitted up so wonderfully, this is the Rock Garden colorway in yarn that's called POLDALE, which is a Polworth Corriedale mix by Arctic Crafts by BENTE. And I gave a skein of this away, and the winner contacted me, and the package has arrived, and I hope that you'll enjoy it as much as I did, because I just think the speckling is pretty darn perfect on these socks, and these socks were an absolute joy to knit. It was so much fun to knit. It's a pattern that takes a little bit of getting used to, but then I did, and I actually flubbed it somewhere along the way, and I thought, I don't care. I ended up, let's see if I can show this to you. I ended up putting the V a couple of stitches over, so the whole V is a little bit off to the side, and you can actually see that this band is narrower than this band, and on the other side it's thicker. So I ended up with a slightly lopsided V, which I thought, oh, that's an interesting design element. Maybe next time I'll do them all lopsided. But it really didn't matter to me. I just kept on going. I have to say, unless there is like a serious problem with socks, I just keep on going. But they just turned out so incredibly beautifully. I'm really quite enamored. They fit my desire for knitting with different yarns. So this is a Polworth Corriedale mix, as I mentioned, with some nylon in it, and it's very nice yarn. It's crisp. It feels really nice, and I also tried sort of like a different pattern that I've had in my stash for quite a while. So there's a little bit of a it's about time element to that. And these are neutral. So even though they're speckled and they've got lots of colors going through them, the end result is really a more neutral look, and I just love it. Absolutely love it. So go and check Bente's yarns out if you are looking for beautiful speckling like this, something that is neutral but that also has lots of little bits in it that just keep you entertained. It's so much fun to see those little bits just show up. Like, ooh, look at that little splash of green, and ooh, that little splash of orange. It's really fun. I don't know if you can see the green there on the edge. There's lots there. So congratulations on your yarn, Bente, and I think maybe I'll just congratulate myself on these socks because I just really, really like them a lot. The weather has cooled down, so I'll now have a wonderful opportunity to wear these all winter long. So that is FO number 2, and just a reminder, these are beautiful sock blockers by Patricia P4 Chen. She is known as on Instagram, and she has a website called Knitography where she sells beautiful items that she makes out of birch from her land. And these are then laser cut, and she has lots of different things. She's got stitch markers and gauge, what do you call those? Gauge ruler type things, and she's got lots of beautiful things. And she's also got a flock of sheep, beautiful sheep, whose fleece she uses to make wool with. So she's got some beautiful items in her shop. I actually would love to knit with some of her yarn, so let's see when I get to that. And then there's an impromptu finished object. And before I get to that, I'm just going to take a little sip out of my tea. It's my Carmen black tea, as often, and Gertie says hi. So there is a shop in town, and the name is just suddenly completely escaping me. I wish I had written it down. But it's sort of it's a shop that was started, I'll put the name down here if you happen to be in the Ottawa area and want to participate. It's a sort of a secondhand shop that is sort of intended to be community-based. It's run by 2 former social workers. They also provide food for people in the area, and it's sort of a community idea that you can just drop in, say hello. They've got some cats in the shop, and a woman I know has started an initiative to knit winter wear for them to sell in the shop, and that money will then go to community-based activities. So she approached me and said, would you knit a couple of items? So I said I would, although I'm so in love with this item. I made this hat, although the one thing about this hat is I don't know that it's the best color for me, and this is not a patterned hat. I just took out some stash that I've had. This is deep stash. This has been in my stash for a rather long time. It is Yarn Days in their sports weight. I have no recollection what the colorway is. The ball band went missing a long time ago. I actually could have checked my Ravelry page, I suppose. And I literally just took 3.5mm needles, cast on 110 stitches, did ribbing for as long as I thought was appropriate. Then I added on an extra 10 stitches evenly around in 4mm needles, and then I decided that I would just do a bobble pattern. I wanted to do something simple on it, nothing too complex, and so I thought, oh, why not do some bobbles? So I figured out I would do bobbles every so often. You have to do bobbles on uneven numbers, right? So they have to have an uneven number of stitches between the bobbles, so that the next time you decide to do a bobble, you will do it smack dab in the middle of the last one. So I think I did it with 9. So you could do like 5, 7, 9, 11, and then this one would be on the 5th stitch between the 2. And then I think I did like 6 rows in between or something like that. And this just turned out so wonderfully. I think I knit it in a couple of nights, or maybe 3. I just couldn't put it down. I was sort of looking for a simpler project because the 2 things I'm working on are a little complicated. So I just put this together. I knit for as long as I thought was appropriate, and then I did some crown decreases. I had 120 stitches on there, and I think I decreased. I started decreasing with knit 8 and decrease, and then, you know, every second row you go by knit 7, knit 6, knit 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you do a couple of little extra decreases until you have the little sort of like complete gather with about 8 stitches left at the end. So sort of a very basic hat construction. There's so many free patterns. I might put something on my project page. I put some notes on my project page, but yeah, this hat turned out really well, and I started feeling like, can I actually give this away? I like it. But I have enough yarn for a second hat, so I think I'm gonna make a second hat because I quite like this. It's not something that I would necessarily wear every day. I think I need to be wearing a bit of makeup in order to wear this color, but I just really liked it. I have a couple of fingering weight hats. This is sport weight, but it feels a bit like a fingering weight hat. And well, one in particular, I have one fingering weight hat and it's too tight. And so I don't really enjoy wearing it that much, whereas this is just really loose and really easy. So that was an impromptu FO that will be going to the charity shop, I think. And I have to say, I quite like the idea of the pink and the mustard together too. I feel like those look good together too. Anyway, so those are the finished objects I have for today. So what have I been working on? Well, I think I mentioned to you last time that when I finished this, I was probably going to be starting the rift. I had made one rift and I wanted to make a second rift out of this particular sweater, this Paloma by Kim Hargreaves that I'd made a couple of years ago that just never got worn. Bad neckline, not wide enough, just wasn't working. So I started swatching by ripping out the sleeve. And two things. First, I didn't like the swatch. I washed the swatch by not washing, that's still attached. I washed the swatch thinking that it would get the kinks out. I knit this swatch on 4.5mm needles, and I just wasn't convinced whether I liked the gauge on it or not. So I thought I would start ripping out the other sleeve and swatch on 4mm needles and then compare and see which one I liked more and then start the sweater. But I somehow lost my steam. The weather started getting cool and I thought, you know what, it's time to start knitting for fall and I'll save this for next spring. So this is hopefully going to be the first thing that I knit next spring or early summer so that I can wear it. I did think, you know, I could wear it kind of as a vest, but I really want it as a summer top. So I'm going to wait on this and put it aside. I've made a note already of some of the things that I'd like to make next summer. And so that's there so that I don't forget it. So that got put aside. And then I thought, what am I going to work on? Well, I had started late March or early April, I had started the rug sweater. You may recall, if you've been around for a little while, it was being hosted in this wonderful bucket bag by Buku, whose work I so enjoy. Wonderful fabrics, screen printed by her, and then made as well. And she just has wonderful designs for knitters. She didn't start by doing that, actually. She started by just making bags, purses, that, you know, crossbody bags, for example, that women would wear, as well as some pouches. But I think over the last few years, she's befriended some knitters. I know I made a comment to her at one point, like, would you ever consider making project bags? And then I'm sure other people did. And she did start making project bags. So I have a few of hers and I could see myself having more. So in here is the rug sweater, which is a pattern by JUNKO OKAMOTO, I believe. I'll put it down here. So this is a sweater that I started in the spring. It's a colorwork sweater. It's meant to be there's only one size. It's meant to be a large, sort of oversized sweater. I started it last spring on 5.5mm and I got just to the point where you're supposed to do the color work, and I stopped because I knew that I wasn't going to be going to the retreat where I'd gotten the yarn, and I thought I'd knit it as a sweater for the retreat. And I also wasn't convinced I liked the gauge. And so when I picked this up now, the last couple of weeks, I decided that I really didn't like the gauge, and I just ripped it out and started over with 6mm needles. This is a fairly chunky yarn by BATTENKILL Fibers in the Sarasota area, and I had got this when I was at the retreat last year. A lot of people got excited because Mary Beth, one of the women at the retreat, was wearing it, and it just looked great and cozy. She had it on all weekend, and what was great was that she had really used kind of like leftovers for the color work, and I can't remember what yarn she had for the main body, but a bunch of us ended up buying some of this chunky yarn from BATTENKILL Fibers. So I started the sweater over again on 6mm needles, and it's going much better now. I'm sort of mid color work, and you may recall I talked in the spring about wanting it to be earthy. I was trying to choose my colors, and so I resolved to do it in black and brown. I'm have to say that I'm doing this quite slowly. I find I don't love doing color work. I think that's I struggle to find a real rhythm. Now, one thing that's not helping is that there are a lot of stitches gathered on these needles. And not that many, but considering that it's chunky yarn. So, and there are long floats required, like there are long sections where there is no color work happening. So it requires, you know, you carrying the floats along the back, and then I'm constantly fidgeting to figure out how, you know, to make sure that the floats are long enough that they're not going to pull, and sometimes it looks like they're pulling. My experience, however, with the pulling look is that if you really are careful about having long enough floats, once you block the sweater out and wet it and everything settles and it works out fine. The Talia sweater that I had made for my friend, and I'll put up a picture here of the two of us. I was wearing my Felix and she was wearing her Talia. The color work after I washed it just sort of sat so beautifully. So I'm trying not to fret about it, but when I'm doing color work I always think, oh dear, is this too tight? But it seems to be going fine. I don't know what that look is there. And I am using, for the black, I am using some 2 strands of yarn. I'm using this Let Lopi in colorway 005, which is like a very dark charcoal gray. And then I've got this heathered black by Americo in her, it's sort of, this was a merino silk linen blend. And, but this was too fine. So I decided to get some Lopi and double strand to come up with a chunky weight for it. And then the brown, I'm using some leftover Gotland yarn that I had gotten at Midwinter Yarns at the Edinburgh Yarn Festival. I had already used some in a skirt, and I am double stranding it with some Lopi in this chocolate brown, which is number 867. So, and that's what I'm using for the color work. And then this is a kind of slightly messy skein of the BATTENKILL. And it's a gray that's got little speckles of black going through it from the fibers. And it's going well. I still have a little ways before it's going to have the separation for the arms quite low. And it's meant to be sort of this kind of like A-shaped, very loose fitting sweater, and I just think if I can get this ready in the next couple of weeks, it'll be perfect for fall hiking. So I'm hoping to get this ready soon. Now I got distracted by hats, but I do want to continue knitting on it. What I find is that I end up doing maybe a couple of rows a night, like I don't get very far. I don't always have that much time to knit, so it's going a little more slowly than I wish it were, considering that it's a chunky yarn. But it's coming along, and I expect that the next time I podcast, it'll be finished. So I'm glad I picked that up, because when I put it aside in the spring, I always have this fear when I put things aside that I won't get back to them. So I'm glad that I've actually gotten back to this, and I'm so happy that I'll finally get through it. Then I've been wanting to knit the Venezia shawl by JOJI LOCATELLI. And I was seeing all over the place, people were talking about the JOJI Fall Cal, which she hosts every year. I think it's been 7 years, 5 or 7 years that they've been hosting this cal. And I thought, well, that'll get me going on the Venezia. So that's another thing that I've started. Now the Venezia, along with the rug, are both projects that require some concentration. So they've both been going a little bit more slowly. The Venezia is not complex. It's just that until you really get into the rhythm, there are two different things happening, and they're sort of, you know, have their own rhythms going, and you have to keep track of that. So this is what I have so far of the Venezia, and it really is beautiful. It's really beautiful, and the yarn is beautiful, and it seems to be pink. And so I found that I was having to look at the pattern more than I would like. Usually what I find with lace is that you get into a rhythm and you just keep going, and after a while I'm just going along and I'm not even looking at the pattern. Whereas only now am I starting to only glance over at the pattern, but I don't feel completely independent, even though it's not that complex. But you've also got to remember to do the increases, and you've got the stitch pattern in the middle as well. So it's going a little bit more slowly, but I'm really enjoying it. And what I try and do is when I sit down, I do a full repeat. And my aim for making this particular one, I like the Venezia because it's a one skein project. And what I find is that I have a lot of large shawls, but I don't have a lot of smaller scarves. And so sometimes if I'm wearing a coat in the winter that has a sort of a snugger collar and it's not that cold, I don't necessarily want to wrap a huge shawl around me. I just want something underneath. And I only have a couple. One that I made years ago, a small little scarf. So I thought, well, this will be perfect. And this beautiful yarn will get used up, which is Roots and Rain, which is a local dyer. Donna is a local dyer, and she has beautiful yarns. There's her label. And this is her tin roof single. So this is a single ply that is dyed with Eastern Brazil wood. So she does natural dyeing, and she sells out of some of the shops locally, and also has sold at different events. There was a Wakefield Christmas market not Christmas, but just late fall. They had knitters there or yarns, and she was selling there. And I don't remember exactly when I bought this, but I've been wanting to use it, and I just thought this is going to make a beautiful Venezia. So I'm really enjoying this. I believe JOJI has you knitting it on 4.5 millimeter needles, and I decided to do it on 4 because I always knit my shawls on 4 millimeter needles, and I thought it would be fine, and it is. So if you happen to be a tight knitter, you might want to go with the 4.5, but the 4 seems to be working perfectly fine for me. I really didn't choose the best needles for this. They're just arrow needles, which are fine. I like arrow needles, but the cable is a little bit wonky. It's got some kinks in it and stuff, but that's what I grabbed, and that's what I'm making it in. And the other thing I just wanted to point out, this wonderful little progress keeper. That is, you know, 3 peas in a pod. This is a stitch marker or a progress keeper by WhimsynSassy Creations. I'll put the little link down here and in the show notes as well. She makes the most wonderful progress keepers, really adorable, cute little things, and I've talked about them before on the podcast. So that was there, especially in the beginning, to show me which was the right side, because in the beginning it really wasn't clear which was the right side. So I put it there to mark the front of the work. And this happens to be in a bag that I made for myself a long time ago when I had an Etsy shop. It was just out of this. There's a lot of pink happening today. So it's in here. So that's going really nicely. And again, I have to say, those two more complex projects have been interjected by hats. So first there was the sort of mustard colored hat, and then last night I cast on another hat for the shop. This time using yarn that has also been in my stash for a rather long time. That was actually a de-stash from Crystal. Crystal, if you happen to be watching, you might remember this. This is JINX yarn. JINX yarn is unfortunately not dyeing anymore, and it really is unfortunate because she had beautiful, beautiful aesthetic. But this is her velveteen colorway, and it's a self-striping DK yarn. And because I'm doing a larger circumference, that the stripes are just about one row rather than, you know, 2 or 3 rows. But it's this sort of kind of like Neapolitan ice cream. There's a vanilla, a strawberry, and a chocolate in there, and it's just doing micro stripes. So I'm just doing a very simple hat. I cast on 110 stitches again with 3.5 millimeters, and I increased to 120 and moved to 4 millimeter needles. But this one is just going to be plain. And once I think it's long enough, it's going to get the crown and get finished up and also get donated to that shop. So not a whole lot to say there, but it really is nice yarn. And it's interesting, I decided to do a twisted rib. So it's definitely got a tighter feel to the ribbing than the other hat. And because it's a DK yarn as opposed to a sport yarn, it really, like, even though I'm using the same stitch count and the same needle sizes, you know, the effect is a little different. So, and that is being housed the same as the speckled socks that I was knitting before, as well as the mustard hat. I just keep using this bag that my friend Sue made for me for my birthday. It's really great, Sue. So that's essentially what I've been working on. And in terms of acquisitions, one thing I wanted to show you last time, and it just completely slipped my mind, was this amazing bag that I got from Harrington Bags, which is Claudia Maheu. She lives in Harrington, Quebec, and makes these absolutely fabulous bags. It's actually got a skein of yarn in it. It's got the purple from the Breezeway still in here, as well as a couple of other little items. So it's being sort of misshaped by that. But she just makes these really great bags that have these wonderful tops to them, and they're a fabulous size for a larger shawl or a sweater. And I had the Breezeway in here. And they're just beautifully constructed. She has stunning fabrics. You may recall I have another one that's sort of an Outlander theme that's got a sort of a gray and brown plaid on it. And when I saw this one, I just couldn't let it go because it was just so beautiful. She's constantly making bags in stunning fabrics and tempting me. But I'm going to stop at 2 for now. But it's a really, really nice bag. And I forgot to show it to you last time. And oh my goodness, I almost forgot to show you something else that I got that I really want to highlight. And it was actually on the rug sweater because immediately I started using it. But I got this beautiful progress keeper from Whitney Marie Anderson, is her handle on Instagram. And she makes these absolutely, let me see now if I can get the light on it, these beautiful, oh, she's backwards, don't be so shy. These beautiful stitch markers. She does females and males and all kinds of hair and different shades of skin, and they're just absolutely beautiful. I've been following her for over a year, I'd say about 1.5 years, and I've been wanting to get one for that whole time, and I finally was able to get one. Often what would happen was the ones that I really wanted would get sold out right away, so I'd wait, and then they get sold out again. It's so beautifully made, and such a lovely, lovely face. And even the back, the hair is just amazing. You can see the detail that's put into it. Her progress keepers are absolutely fabulous. It's a little bit of a larger progress keeper, so it's perfect for this, you know, a heavier weight yarn. So this little beauty is going to be used with my rug sweater, and I'm not quite sure, I don't want to lose sight of her. So I'll have to see if there's a way for me to have her around all the time, but I really love that. I'm so happy to finally have one. And okay, so there was a impromptu purchase that happened this week. So basically, I feel like I have to justify myself. I was really not interested in buying yarn. And then, and I really haven't bought yarn for quite a while. And then Megan Nodecker, who's also known as Pip and Pin, she published the Cat Bells cardigan this week, and I'll put a picture up here so you can see what it looks like. She originally had the Cat Bells sweater, which I hadn't bought, but I'd really been eyeing it and eyeing it. And then when she came out with the Cat Bells cardigan, I needed to make it. But I really don't have a lot of worsted weight yarn in my stash. I've got tons of fingering, I've got tons of sport and DK, but I have practically no worsted weight, like in the sweater quantity. I might have an odd skein here and there. And I had been wanting to use up a gift certificate and try out a couple of yarns. And one of the yarns that I've been wanting to try out is being sold at Wabi Sabi, my local yarn shop here. And it is by Gathering Yarn, and it's called Haynes Creek Heathers. So I ended up buying a sweater quantity of this absolutely stunning sort of plum burgundy yarn. It's a worsted weight. In fact, they call it an Aran weight. And this is, do they have a color? Well, it's color 149, nothing terribly exciting in the color name, but it's this burgundy color. And it's just absolutely beautiful. So I am going to be casting on, in fact, once I finish the rug, I've already wound one skein so that I can start swatching with it, and I'll be casting on the Cat Bells cardigan. It's so beautiful. It's going to be perfect for fall, and I'm really excited about that. And while I was spending the gift certificate, I thought, well, another yarn that I've really been wanting to try for a long time, and every time I see this yarn, I'm so attracted to this green. So I just decided, that's it, I'm buying a sweater quantity of this, most likely to make a sweater for Alejandro. I've been looking at some sweaters, and I think I've found one. I have to show it to him to see if he likes it, that I'm going to cast on for him. So this is the RETROSARIA POMAR VOVO, which is a 100% wool yarn from Portugal. And her colors are so rich, especially in these more heathered ones. Honestly, I could have bought any other of the other ones. They were just as beautiful, but this green has been calling me. I think last winter, Wabi Sabi had this yarn, and then they sold out, and I sort of regretted not getting it. And so I thought, you know what, that's it. I need to knit with this and see the color come out. It's such a beautiful green. And there's a sweater pattern by Kate Davies that I think might work for Alejandro, and it requires this weight yarn. So we'll see. If not, it'll be something else. There was also a color work one, and I thought I could go back and get something to do a little bit of a color work for him. But we'll see. We'll see what he ends up choosing. But that hopefully will get knit up this fall as well. It sort of was not quite in my plans, but then when I saw that Cat Bells cardigan, I was just like, I have to make it. And Megan has designed so many beautiful patterns, and it just hasn't happened that I've knit one. There was one pattern that I was looking, I think I told you guys that I was looking for a particular blue for, and it was one of her patterns. I think that might have been in the late spring or something like that. I never found the blue, and so I never knit the sweater. And so that was the Mount Pleasant. That's the sweater that I wanted to knit. It's a cute little sort of short sleeve top with some lace detail here at the bottom, really nice. And so that hasn't happened yet. And she's got other patterns too that I really, really like. And she's evolving really beautifully as a designer. So I'm really excited to knit one of her patterns. So that'll be up next. So next time I podcast, hopefully that will be on the needles. And yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing next. I had also wanted to make a girlfriend cardigan by ANKESTRICK, I believe. Is it ANKESTRICK? Somehow I always get ANKESTRICK and Heidi Kiermaier mixed up. There's a certain similarity in their aesthetic, but I'd wanted to make that next. But I think I'm going to make the cat bells, and I'll do the girlfriend cardigan at another time. And that just about does it for the knitting content of the podcast. And so I just thought I'd mention a little bit about life in the last month or so. August was a roller coaster of a month. There were some real highs and some not so great moments as well. We had a wonderful time at a cottage for a week with the family, and that was really wonderful. Swimming every day in a beautiful lake with the loons. It was just awesome. And there was footage of that. And also I went to my friend's cottage for a weekend, and we just did a lot of swimming, and it was really, really wonderful. We also had, you probably know, I've mentioned this before, that my mother has dementia, Alzheimer's, and lives in a nursing home near here. And there was just some stuff going on with her, and so it took a while to stabilize that. So that was a little bit of it took quite a bit of my attention in August. And then it was also just preparing for school and not knowing what school would look like in this COVID context. That has been, it's been a challenge. I know it's been a challenge for everybody. You know, I have friends who are teachers, and I just think, how are they teaching in this context? It must be extremely challenging. And just as parents, just trying to navigate, like, what is our life going to look like for the next little while, has been a little bit of a challenge. But school has started. The kids here in Ontario are divided in half, so the school is only ever half full, and kids are in class one day and at home, and they alternate between being in class and at home, and between cohorts A and B. And they've divided the year up in these quadmesters as opposed to semesters, and that's the part I find is a little bit strange, because basically teachers are having to teach the curriculum in half the time. So that can be a little bit intense for certain subjects that are that have bigger concepts, and could be challenging for some students. So we'll see how it goes. It's obviously all an experiment at this point, and I know that it's a challenge for trying to keep life going and also keep everybody safe. So let's see what this fall is going to be like. Let's hope for the best, and for you know, not the spike that we're expecting. The cases have been going up, unfortunately, and the governments are having to put measures in place. So we'll see what the fall is like. We're still obviously all dealing with COVID and trying to live through it. I hope that you guys are doing okay. Feel free to share below how things have been for you, what summer has been like for you, if it's been, you've been able to find moments of joy, if you know, how things have been going for you. If you feel like sharing, I'd love to hear how things are going for others. If you're not interested ever in sharing in YouTube, but you would like to you know, say something or check something, you can also come into our Ravelry group. There's always a thread for the show, for this episode, and for the current episode, and you're welcome to come in there and comment as well. So anyway, let me know how you're doing. What are you working on? If you feel like telling me about that or anything like that. But it is all a very different time, with different moments of having to, you know, accommodate, get used to, change one's life a little bit. It's been a challenge and it's been a strange time in the sense that there's some moments that are really great, and then other moments where I find it really challenging. And I've been sort of observing, you know, how people have been feeling. It feels like in the spring there was a surge in I mean, first of all, everybody was in shock, But there was also a surge of creativity, I think. People were taking the time to experiment with new things, do different things, get to things they hadn't been able to get to in a long time. There was a lot of that. And then I think summer came along and everybody was probably, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, was probably in a summer type of feeling. I don't know what it was like for people in the Northern or in the Southern Hemisphere where you were experiencing winter. And I think that there's been a little bit of trepidation with the fall and people wondering like what is going to happen. But hopefully we'll get through that, and it would be great to be able to find a rhythm and maybe find some creativity, some mojo in all of this, because it's been a little bit of up and down, I would say. So let's see how things go. I also did something in August because I normally have really bad eczema on my hand. It's something that started 3 years ago and it's actually in pretty good shape, but you can see there's a patch that's kind of, and it's all around here. And it's been really bad this summer. It was just like, and I don't know if you've ever had eczema, but when it's bad, it's like your skin is crawling. It can be itchy, it can be blistery, and it was getting really bad. And so I decided in August to do an experiment of not having any dairy, because people have talked about a link between dairy and eczema. And I thought, well, look, let me try it. I'm lactose intolerant anyway, so I don't do a lot of dairy. But I had been finding myself, especially in the spring, we were doing a lot of COVID baking, which requires wheat and dairy and eggs and butter. So I thought, you know, let me really go cold turkey on the dairy and see what happens. Nothing happened. In fact, it got worse. So I thought, dairy is certainly not the sole culprit of what's happening with my eczema. And suddenly in the last week, it's actually gotten a lot better. So I'm trying to figure out what that is. Why did it suddenly get better? I have no idea. Is it just that maybe finally, I don't eat a lot of dairy, as I said, but maybe it's the changing weather that it's suddenly gotten better. I have no idea. So, but that was a little experiment I did in August to see if not having dairy would have an impact on my eczema. I know other people have had success with that. Didn't do a thing for me, unfortunately. In August, I also did a whole bunch of reading, which I'll just tell you about really quickly. I read Jamaica In by Daphne du Maurier, which is actually one of her first successes. It was quite an early book, and I didn't love it. I love the other two books by Daphne du Maurier that I've read, Rebecca and My Cousin Rachel. I thought they were both very interesting. Lots of elements being questioned in a way through her work. This work was one of her earlier works, and although there was a little bit of that and a glimmer of that, it was a much more straightforward book, and I actually found the ending a little disappointing, but it was still well written. It was a well-told story, and I'm looking forward to reading one of her last works, and I'm curious to see the elements that are in that book, because I find she really questions gender roles a lot, and the stereotypes, even in the 1930s, was questioning these stereotypes. So that's great. It was very interesting, and I really enjoy her work a lot. The other book that I read was The Stationery Shop by MARJAN KAMALI, and this is a story that takes place in Iran starting in the 50s. So there is some political history in it as well, but it's essentially a kind of a love or unrequited love story between two young people and later in their lives. And it was an enjoyable story. I really enjoyed listening to it. It was a little bit, it was very lyrical, but kind of bordering on sappy for me at times. But still a really enjoyable story, and it was good. But it was a little sappy for me, I have to say. I followed that by a children's book, Coyote Tales by Thomas King, who is a Canadian, I believe he's Canadian, Indigenous writer, yes. And he is responsible for The Inconvenient Indian. which is a book that I'll be reading soon. But this was a children's story with 2 tales in it about the coyote and why the coyote howls at the moon, and a little bit about vanity and tricksters in the second tale. It was really good. If you are looking for a book for children, this was the audio book, but there is a hard copy book with illustrations. So that is available for people if they're looking for something for their children as well. But I really enjoyed it. It was very short. It was a half an hour, but it was really fun. I also started listening to Dare to Lead by Brené Brown, which I was really, really enjoying. But because it is about leadership in a work context, it's very dense, lots and lots to think about. Excellent, excellent ideas. Really, really great. But I was thinking about work when I didn't really want to be thinking about work. So I stopped listening to it, and I have to figure out if there's a way for me to listen to it perhaps in a particular moment when I don't mind that. But normally I listen to books when I go out for my walks, and if anything, I would rather think about nothing and just listen to a story rather than starting to think about work and, you know, the people at my work and how to deal with certain situations and so forth. So I stopped listening to it, but I really would like to listen to it and to the end, because it really was very, very interesting. And I think anybody who's read anything by Brené Brown has a lot of good things to say about her. And that's essentially what I've been reading. I've just started a book by JOJI. JOJI is the woman who wrote Homegoing. That was one of my favorite books from last year. I absolutely loved that book. And she has just come out with her second book called Transcendent Kingdom. And I've just started listening to it, so I can't say a whole lot about it. But that's what's on my earbuds right now. So, apart from that, you know, we've just been continuing to telework and, as I said, get used to this new routine for the fall with the kids kind of out of the house. That's sort of a nice part of it. But keeping everybody safe at the same time and trying to enjoy life and just going along. So I hope that this podcast has found you well. I hope you've had a chance to have a cup of something and work on a project, and feel free to comment below, and we'll see you next time. I think next time I may tell you a little bit about my favorite shawls and scarves that I wear, since I was talking about that a little bit earlier. So I'll bring some of those on. This weekend I'm hoping to do the switch over between summer and winter, and then those will all be out and I'll be able to share those with you. So until next time, take care and stay safe. Bye-bye.
The stars have come in close just to see you, I suppose, and they're a-gleaming. You must be dreaming, and the sun has said goodbye with a twinkle in his eye. He's left the ocean with sweet emotion. We go dancing in the rain, riding on a midnight train, away so slowly. And the moon is looking down on the sleepy side of town, and he's so lonely. I love you only. I love you only. All the birds have taken flight. It's their favorite time of night when they can hear you from somewhere near you. And the palm trees try to bend to be closer to their friends. They're made of magic. Reach out and grab it. We go dancing in the rain, riding on a midnight train, away so slowly. And